All right. Hello, Fortinos, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Ministry Revealed. It is June 28th, 2025. And look at that. It's 7:17 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. You guys know that number well if you've been following for a bit. Well, tonight we're going to have some fun. It's going to be some new revelation, new difference within the Gospels of a piece that is credited to Pietra, our sister in South Africa. She had sent me a message in things that she was reading and studying, and realized that there was this difference within two of the Gospels. One Gospel doesn't talk about it, it just makes mention, but the other two Gospels talk about it, and they speak about it differently. And I thought, okay, I'll make a note of it. As you guys know, I'm studying a lot of different things, and people send me different things, and some things catch my attention right away, others I get to later. Well, this was one I actually thought I was going to get to later. I had a little bit of time, so I thought, okay, I'll start scrolling through and see what I catch. And lo and behold, the revelation of the differences in the Gospels continue to give out more and more and more revelation. It can keep going, right? All of these differences in the Gospels are purposeful and have meaning in the end of days. They are all prophecy, and tonight will be no different. It's actually really, really interesting once you see what these are saying and how they're saying it and who's saying it. There's a reason it's in order, but by three, because everything is in threes, as you guys know. This is no different here tonight. This will be in threes. And in the other one, the layout is different because it's specific to the final 14th year as the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. All because of the difference in the Gospels that it's in. It's incredible. It's really, really wild to see, and I think it'll be a blessing. It'll continue to strengthen us and draw us closer and dig in even deeper. So with that, that's what we're going to be getting into. But I'm not just going to go right into it. I want to make sure you guys, get the refresher, a little bit of groundwork, so you could see what other verses, other teachings that we've taught on have said about these things, so that when we get there and you see what's said in these chapters, you're going to say, "Oh my goodness, there it is. The same wording, the same wording. The same event, the same event. The same event, the same event." All revealed in the three portions of Christ that we know relate to pre, mid, and post, or the three comings of the Lord, not directly, as you know, connected to pre, mid, and post, but in the time frame of them, right? We know the pre happens, and then the Lord comes on the 8th day and is here for 40 days. We know the Lord comes at the end of the 6th year of seals, and the mid trib doesn't happen until about the middle of the 7th year. And then, of course, the post trib is the Lord's return, feet down on the Mount of Olives at the 14th year. Okay? And then, about a year and 6 months later, the other group that was flown away on the wings of an eagle will then be brought back. it's it's wild. So what this is really connected to is these three events. But you would have never ever seen it like this before. Not in this passage that we're going to go into. It didn't even dawn on me all of these years. After what, 7.5, almost 8 years in September, 8 years of the Gospels being revealed prophetically in the end of days, never even dawned on me to look at that. There are so many other differences in the Gospels, though we've covered dozens of them, and dozens of differences that weren't differences, let alone the dozens of differences we've revealed. There were dozens of other things that were the way chapters were laid out with their verses, told a story as well. I mean, it can continue on forever. It's because the word is never ending. It will never die. it's unbelievable what we've been blessed to understand, and tonight is going to be no different. But before we get there, I wanted to say there's a couple things I want to share today. Two things. They're both exciting in different ways. One is my mom, who is 83 years old. She'll be 84 shortly in on the 2nd of August, and there's a reason I'm bringing that up. I moved out from my mom. I'm 52. I moved out from my mom, man, 33-ish years ago, something like that. I think it was 33 years ago, actually. And about 30 years ago, I moved out to Calgary from Ottawa. And so my mom has been living on her own. Didn't get remarried. She's been living on her own in a one-bedroom apartment in Ottawa all of these years. So she is a very strong, independent woman. And she had a couple of scares this past year. And we've been trying to get her to move to Calgary, where I live. I have a sister, but my sister lives in Texas. So everybody is very far away from my mom. And so my mom, though, being very independent, she didn't want to move. And now for the last few months, we've been getting things in order. And she's going to be moving to Calgary. She's not going to be moving with us. We don't have the room and she can't have stairs. But she's going to be moving into an apartment. So there's a lot of things I'll be busy with, especially late July for about 8-9 days. I'm going with my wife to Ottawa. So we've got to fly. We've got to get an Airbnb because there's no room. We're packing up her house. And the movers, I found a great formula for an inexpensive way, well, kind of the least expensive you can in a cross-Canada trip to move my mother. And then we've got to fly back and get all the stuff set up here. And so a couple of reasons I mentioned that. If you're able to support the ministry, we really are going to need some help with that. Some things are covered by my mother and by my sister and helping out, but it's still going to cost us a chunk of change to get my mom out here. So if you're able to support, remember you can go to ministryrevealed.com and there's a link there to donate. You can click on this link right here. It'll bring it up and you can either send to our address or come to our PayPal right here. And we'll start banking some of this so that we can make sure everything's taken care of and we can get my mom here. She's had a couple of scares where she had to call a cab to go to the hospital, and then she had to wait for 8 hours in emergency by herself, being in her 80s, and her friends are in their 70s and 80s, and some of them can't help anymore, and she's relying on friends' kids to do it, and neighbors in her apartment building, and so she's realized it's time to come. So we're grateful. My mom, like a lot of moms, they sometimes they could be handfuls, and I'm not used to it. I haven't been with my mom, in the same city and being able to do these things for over 30 years. So it's going to be quite the transition, to say the least. And but we're looking forward to it. I mean, she'll be so happy. She'll be with her son and her daughter-in-law and her granddaughter and her grandson that she hasn't seen in person since they were just little kids, like 3 years old in a year, something like that. So outside of FaceTime, now she'll be able to see them and we can go visit. She'll be living about 10 minutes away. So I wanted to say that because it's an exciting time. It's going to be a busy time, and we can use the help if you're able. If you feel you'd like to help us there, that would be appreciated. The other thing I wanted to let you guys know, which I have been waiting for a few months now, maybe even since the beginning of the year, was dubbing for the YouTube videos. Now, I was looking at doing a paid program, paid software to be able to dub the videos. But we have long teachings and detailed teachings, and it would be a lot of money to be able to do our videos every month dubbed into about, say 10 different languages. It wasn't feasible for what we have here in the ministry in our ability to pay it. So I had been hoping and praying for a long time that YouTube was going to make it available to us. And they first made it available, I think it was like 3 million or 8 million people or something like that, YouTube channels. and I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And I looked a couple days ago, and bam, there it was. I was so excited. They now made it available to 30 million different YouTube channels. And I went and checked on, it happened on June 24th. I just so happened to check on like the 25th or 26th, and it was available. Now, it probably isn't going to be perfect, but I'm sure it will be good for those who want to share info and in their own languages with family or friends, or send them links or whatever it is going forward, which I believe, well, not I believe, it's supposed to include this video going forward. Unfortunately, it doesn't backtrack all the other videos. So once this is posted, I believe you guys will be able to. Maybe there'll be a link in the video, right? When you click on the little wheel with the little links on it, when you click on that, you'll be able to hear it in your language of choice. So it's not going to be a recap of my voice. It'll just be some, whatever voice they use that will do it. But at least we've now got these teachings that will start to be in all of your languages. So that was very, very, very exciting, and I wanted to share that with you as well. So with that, let's go to where we usually start, which is, yes, you know it, we're going to the playlists, because if anybody's new watching this right now, you will have already heard things at the beginning that will have really caused you to say, what's this guy talking about? 14-year tribulation, pre, mid, post, all being true, who the Gospels are speaking to, and that the differences reveal prophecy. Well, what we always recommend is you can go to ministryrevealed.com, go to the menu and click on the intro or intro series, whatever it's called, or you can come here to the playlist on YouTube, click on this playlist right here, and this is what will come up. This is these are the first 4 teachings right here that anybody who's new, I always recommend to come and start with. This one right here is a 22-minute intro into little tidbits to warm you up for what you're going to see in the next 3 teachings. The second one, it's called Who the Gospels Are Speaking to. This one is just a little 30-minute Bible study intro to show you that the differences of the synoptic Gospels in the stories that sound similar but are written differently, that have different timing of day counts in them, that sometimes sound completely different, they're all prophecy built into them. Absolutely every single one. And you're going to see a glimpse of that again here tonight. What they reveal is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the last will be first, the first will be last. In the end of days, it goes Luke, Mark, Matthew, pre, mid, post. And once you begin to see it, once you understand it, then the discourses will also open up to you. There's a teaching way down here for the discourses, but don't go there right away. Just start with this to get an understanding, to be able to see simple little differences, like how Jesus was arrayed in Luke in a gorgeous robe before the cross, which means white, radiant, beautiful, like a bride. In Mark, he's arrayed in purple, and in Matthew, he's arrayed in scarlet. And it just so happens purple and scarlet are the tribulation colors that the woman riding the beast wears. Huh. One dressed like gorgeous white bride, and the other one purple, and the other one scarlet? Sounds like Mark and Matthew have something about staying behind during tribulation. That's exactly what it is, because they speak to 3 different groups of people. And what happens is you'll come to realize that in the discourses, there's a portion that happens in Luke's, then there's Mark's, and then there's Matthew's. And what you'll come to realize is as you start to understand the Gospels and their differences and who they're speaking to, you'll realize that the end of days isn't 7 years, but 14 years. There's 14 years in a little period called above. It starts with the pre-trib, and then the 50 days above, then there's 7 years of seals and 7 years of trumpets. And no, it's not one seal to 1 year and one trumpet to 1 year. That's not how it plays out. They'll start, some will start, some will stop, some will intermingle and cross over with others. Okay, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but it is 7 years of seals and 7 years of trumpets. That's how it all started with the Gospels, in the revelation of the Gospels, and this revelation is what began the revelation of the 14 years. This started almost 8 years ago, and we've been revealing the truth of it ever since. Then You're going to say, well, how come nobody knew about this? Well, number one, it wasn't yet time. And number two, it's because of video number 4, which is a big one. It's all because of Matthew. It's a long one, and it is worth every moment of your time if you're interested in learning it, because it will blow your mind, and it's all in the title. We've all been taught from the Gospel of Matthew for centuries, and we've only looked to Mark and to Matthew to pull out little other details to fill in the story of Mark. And what happens, you have to understand, as I said in the beginning, everything is in threes. So just like there's pre, mid, and post, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Satan, the beast, the false prophet, there's the was from creation to Christ, the is from Christ until the moment of the pre-trib, and then the is to come from the pre-trib until it's all done. Everything is in threes. And what had happened is we've all been taught in the is of the things that Jesus did and the things that he said and what the epistles tell us and through the gospels and so forth. But we've all been taught them from the foundation of Matthew. So we've never been taught to look or to understand why do we have Mark and why do we have Luke. And people have understood that there were different audiences over the centuries. People have understood it, but that's where it ended because they didn't know what it meant. Well, this here will reveal to you those differences in the Gospels and what they mean within those differences to the prophetic end of days. And because we've all been taught from Matthew and only pull a little from Mark and even less from Luke to try to fill in those blanks of Matthew, the people who have studied prophecy, unbeknownst to them, have done the same thing because they all still see it through the way everybody's been taught the is over the last several hundred years. This will blow your mind. These first 4 teachings will open up your understanding of prophecy as it has never, ever been understood before. And I promise you, it'll be worth all of your time. So with that, that's my usual little opening to get people to go and check it out. And now we are going to get into this. But as we get into this, we are going to start first with a couple little pieces that I want to share from the last teaching. For those who have watched it, not all that many yet, but for those that have watched this last one, there were a few things that we talked about and some more exciting revelation, more details. And there was a piece in it where we talk about knowing and understanding the beast. We know that the beast is Arab. Okay? It's Arab. It's through the Muslim nations. It's there written in black and white in Scripture. And we're going to build on it again. And I'm going to do another teaching with the Revelation 17 and Daniel 8 and Daniel 7 and tie that all together in one little bundle. We did one not too long ago, but it was the first time. So I'm not going to do it right away, but I do plan on bringing it up again because it's so clear as to what the beast is now, how much more detail we have of the beast, what it consists of and its parts being many of the Arab and the Muslim nations. But in that last teaching, one of our brothers, Charlie, made a good catch. You see this right here? We've talked about this, right? This is Daniel chapter 2. We see the image of the beast and the toes, the feet and the toes were part of clay and part of iron. And we see that it was mixed with, right? Iron mixed with clay. So what is it about this word mixed? Okay? Because remember, we understand the portion of Arab. So let's go have a look at this real quick. Let's go into Daniel chapter 2 and show you something that our brother Charlie caught. I think it was 41. No. Right here in 43. So here's the word mixed. It's the Hebrew word 6151. Look at what it means. Arab. To mix, to commingle. And it comes from the Hebrew word 6148. Look at what it means. Arab. Okay? To braid, that is to intermix. These are the Arabs. Okay? And if you want to understand it, we can go to, where was it? I think it's in 1 Kings chapter 10, where we see, I think it's the first time we see the word Arabia. And wouldn't you know what the connection is? Watch this. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14. Now the weight of the gold that came to Solomon in that year was 666 talents of gold. This is the only other place besides Revelation 13 where you have 666, right? Verse 15 says, beside that, he had of the merchantmen and of the traffic of the spice merchants, and of all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the country. Here's the word for Arabia. Okay? Arab with an E, from Arabia, 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 15, from the word 6148. Okay? Because Arabia, the Arabs, are the mixed race, is what it's telling us. They're the mixed. They are the iron and the toes. So what do you, the iron mixed with miry clay. And there will be those who will mix themselves with them, siding with the beast in the end of days. So I thought that that was a great catch, because what you just saw is that the 10 kings from Revelation 17 that are as the 10 toes in Daniel, that are the 10 horns in Revelation 17, we know that their typology here is what? The iron mixed with clay. What is the iron mixed with clay? The mixed race people, which are the Arabs. Again, we talked about it being the beast, and that the entire beast system is built of these Arab nations. But one of the questions that still remained at the end is, there were 10 toes or 10 horns, right? They're the exact same story. It's just a different typology, a different picture, but it's the same story. And what we were wondering is, those 10 kings, are they all going to have to be Arab nations or Muslim type nations that side with them? Will Canada, will America or Mexico, are they going to join in as part of those 10 kings? Or, are they just going to be Middle Eastern ones again? Well, looks like we've got the answer now. The mixed ones, who are the Arabs. Hello. The beast of the end of days is clearly, unequivocally Arab, guys. Okay? So now let me show you another piece. Excuse me. There was this that we shared in the last teaching at the very end that was very interesting. We've seen this in Revelation chapter 2. We've got an incredible teaching. If you're new to the ministry, it's in, watch those first 4 intros, but then watch the 7 churches of Revelation in that intro series. The 12 tribes in the wilderness is another great one. But the 7 churches will blow your mind once you begin to understand these revelations of the Gospels and the years and how it plays out. It'll blow your mind. There's a reason why there are 4 churches listed in one chapter in Revelation 2 and 3 churches listed in Revelation 4. It's crazy. It's wild when you understand even the reasoning for why the Spirit led the people who divided the chapters and the verses the way they did it the way they did. They were just as inspired as the people who wrote the words when the Spirit led them in that as well. And we have proven it here over and over and over again. Well, you'll remember that the church of Pergamum is that midish point, about 2.5 years into the 14 years, into the midish point, about midish, right? 2.5 years into seals, and we see Balaam and Balak, the typology of the false, the beast and the false prophet. Okay, and we see that they cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel. What? To eat things sacrificed unto idols. We showed this and found out that in the Apocrypha of Second Esdras, which has a fascinatingly incredible amount of prophecy that is able to be understood through the revelations of Scripture, that when we then came to read this Apocrypha, more detail opened up in the exact same timing of these events. It was wild. And here was one of the examples in the last one. It says, "For behold, the burning wrath of a great multitude is kindled over you, and they shall carry some of you off." You guys know what that means. That's like a worker group, those during seals that are serving the Lord. "They will carry off some of you, and shall feed you what was sacrificed to idols. And those who consent to eat shall be held in derision and contempt, and be trodden under foot." Yikes, right? Yikes. So it doesn't mean you're cast out and you're not going to belong to Christ anymore. But it's going to show that if it's telling us that if people eat of things sacrificed unto idols in the midst of tribulation, like the, not being able to eat, buy or sell, right? And you're not going to be able to eat or drink or get any of that stuff. Well, if you succumb to the beast, yikes, right? That's the option some people will take. But there are others, as some of them are taken and put what? Cast into prison. Some won't take the food, right? Because we now know this in advance. But if you do, there's those, they will be part of those trodden underfoot who won't make it alive unto the mid-trib, okay, when that portion is done. They will have been killed through the beast system and the Christians and those that will be killed during that time. But what was interesting, we taught on this already. We showed the timing of it at the time of the beast and the false prophet. Well, there was a piece of scripture that I taught on years ago. Like, it's been close to 8 years, so it's probably, this was like 7.5 years ago. This is how long ago it was. And our brother Roy had mentioned it to me. Now, he was talking in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and as I went through, there's some of it there, but you really see a lot of it also in chapter 8. But what does it tell us? It talks about eating things sacrificed to idols and being cautious not to do it because of what it can do, what it can cause other people to think when they realize. Now remember, we're always talking about prophecy. We're talking about the is to come. So this is a little bit more detail from that last teaching about not eating things sacrificed unto idols, especially when you're told and you know that it's been sacrificed unto idols, which is to the beast. So in the end of days, if that happens, we're to refuse it, obviously. But as the worker, as the remnant group who will serve the Lord, that Smyrna end of days group, they especially should not succumb to it. And you're going to see here in 1 Corinthians 8:1, this kind of, I don't want to say closing piece, but this more detailed going further from that last teaching about eating things sacrificed unto idols. So we'll go in this here in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. "Now as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffed up, but charity edifieth." Okay? Let me say that again. We know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffed up, but charity edifieth. "And if any man think that he knoweth all things, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know. But if any man love God, the same is known of him." Here we go. "As concerning, therefore, the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other God but one. For though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be gods many and lords many, but to us there is but one God, the Father, of whom all things, and we of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him. Howbeit, there is not in every man that knowledge. For some, the conscience of the idol unto this hour eat. Okay? So some people are even doing it now. Unto this hour eat. It is a thing offered unto an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. So now we're starting to get to the point where it's telling us those who will be aware, those who understand, need to say no for the sake of those around them. That's what this is getting to. But meat commandeth us not to God. Okay? But meat condemns us not to God. For neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. Okay? We're not constrained by the things that we eat, unless you're aware that you're eating something sacrificed unto idols. Okay? If you know that it is. Like in chapter 10, it talks about if you go to somebody and you're going to their house and they've prepared a meal, you're to eat it and not ask any questions. You're to be grateful for it, because in all of it, God gave it to us. But if that person whose house you go to and the meal's prepared and it's brought before you, and they say that they sacrificed it unto whatever God it was, then you're not to eat of it. Okay? That's the storyline going on. So in verse 9, it says, but take heed, lest by any means this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak. For if any man see thee, which has knowledge, sit at meat in an idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered unto idols? See, remember the application of this in the end of days. We touched on it in the last teaching, where this is what's going to happen if you eat those things. But this is from the perspective now of the workers, that if they succumb and they just, okay, I'm doing it anyways because they're so hungry in the end of days, right? The Lord will provide many things, but something happens to one of them and they succumb to this. What will happen to all those who are weaker minded, who don't have the knowledge and the understanding? They would then succumb to it and think it's okay. You see? Setting that bad example. Okay? And then it says, and through thy knowledge shall the weaker brother perish for whom Christ died. Well, why would he perish? He ate that food. What's going to happen? He's going to be tread underfoot. Hello. The Lord's going to allow him to be tread underfoot because he ate it. But why did he eat it? Because he saw somebody with knowledge doing it, even though he had probably already explained that it wasn't to be allowed, that you shouldn't do it, and they did it anyways. These are things for us to understand, guys. This is all part of the growing revelation of the understanding of a people being prepared. Okay? But when you sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. See that? Is it talking about any? No. Paul here is like as a tribulation in the picture of the end of days. He is a picture of these servant remnant that the Lord has chosen and prepared, who are going to be working this time during like that Smyrna group. And there will be other Christians, people coming by like crazy into Christianity, coming to the Lord, repentant and seeking the Lord. And they'll be weak in their conscience, weak in their understanding with the Lord. Millions upon millions of them. So imagine being that kind of example to them. And then they eat. And now they die and they're not able to make it to the end alive. Yikes. You see? And what is that for us? That's a sin for us against the Lord as well. Right? Verse 12. These are little tidbits that may not seem like much when you just read Scripture. But in the prophetic of what we're talking about in the end of days, There is a growing understanding of deeper and deeper and deeper detail that's preparing a group of people, of which I believe most of us, many of us in this ministry are part of because of what's been happening for almost 8 years. Now, does that mean these things don't apply to our present day? Well, of course they do. You're with a group of Christians. You finished a Bible study or something, and then they want to go to the bar, and you go to the bar with them, and you have a scotch, and you're sipping a scotch, and they're like, oh, okay, I guess it's okay to drink, as long as we're having a little bit. He's having a drink. You see, they're going to look to the person that they know has understanding and is close with the Lord, and they're going to use that as an example. You see, that happens all the time. That's what we have to be careful of, even as we live now, but multiplied in the end of days. All right. Now, like I was saying earlier, everything is in threes. Okay, now we're going to start to build into this new revelation connected to all of the other revelations from this piece in the Gospels, within 2 Gospels specifically. But like I said, I'm not just going to go there. I'm going to build it up so that you guys can be aware, you can understand. If there are those who are not quite sure, if there are those who really understand it, well, it'll be a brief recap, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, and you'll see why I've spoken about this first. So one of the great examples is, of course, Deuteronomy 16. You know I love me some Deuteronomy 16. Why? Because there are 3 feasts of the Lord to which every male is supposed to show up and to show up not empty-handed, right? And we know it's unleavened bread, which is 7 days. It's 6th and then the 7th. It's the Feast of Weeks, and it's the 7 days of Tabernacles. So what do you got? 7, 1, 7. That's why it was kind of cool that tonight started. I didn't plan it. It just so happened I looked and it was 7/17. So that was pretty cool. But what do we know about this? Of course, we've revealed this numerous times over the last few years, and especially with greater detail over the past, like since the fall or so. Okay? We know, we have proven biblically, scripturally, that the pre-trib is connected to the Feast of Weeks. We know that the Feast of Weeks, that how it plays out, right? It says, 7 weeks shall thou number unto thee, begin to number from such time as you begin to number 7 weeks, from such time as you begin to put the sickle to the corn. Okay? This isn't just any old grain. This is wheat. How do we know? Because the Feast of Weeks is the wheat harvest. Okay? Which means what? Well, of course, 7 Sabbaths. Then the following day, you number 7 weeks. Then the 50th day is Pentecost. So Feast of Weeks and Pentecost are not the same thing, even though everybody tries to tell you it is. We've proven this. We've understood it. We know the pre-trib is connected to the Feast of Weeks. Then you have 7 years of seals, like 7 days of unleavened bread, which are 6 days, and then the 7th is a solemn assembly, which in the 7th year of seals is the mid-trib great multitude rapture. Then you've got the 7 years or 7 days of tabernacles as 7 years of trumpet judgments. And there is no rest on this 7th day. We know the 7th day of tabernacles is the 7th year of trumpets, which is the 14th year overall, when the Lord returns feet down, and you've got one final year, which we'll tie into this later. You've got one final year where the Lord deals as it was in the days of Noah. And then what happens? Well, there's no solemn assembly in those 7. But if you go to Leviticus 23, the 8th day is the solemn assembly. And what is the 8th day? The 8th day is the Jubilee. That is the 8th day. So what you find out is the 7 years of seals and the 7 years of trumpets are the final 2 sets of 7 of a 7 times 7 years for 49. They're the final 2 sets of 7 before the final Jubilee. That's how it plays out. But everything starts with what? The Feast of Weeks. Now, There's a mystery in it, though, which we've shared a lot since this past fall and especially this year. An incredible mystery from John chapter 4 that tells us that the Feast of Weeks is going to be observed 4 months earlier. Okay? Which brings us to early February of 2026 instead of, late spring to early summer, the beginning of summer, late spring to the beginning of summer generally for where the Feast of Weeks would be and the 7 weeks begin. So we know it's going to be 4 months earlier, and there is an incredible mystery that we've revealed about why that is. But what is the Feast of Weeks all about? What's to be done at the Feast of Weeks? Okay? 2 wave loaves. 2 wave loaves are to be brought and waved before the Lord. Okay? These 2 wave loaves are what? They're baked with leaven, and they are the first fruits unto the Lord. Hello. Okay? They are 2 wave loaves, so they're 2 loaves of bread baked with leaven, so they're puffed up loaves. Okay? They're filled up loaves. They're not unleavened. They're leavened, and they are the first fruits unto the Lord. That is the Feast of Weeks of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, exactly as it says in Exodus 34:22. Okay? And what do we see here? Of course, it's the 2 loaves of leavened bread. What do we know the typology of these 2 loaves of leavened bread are? Well, they're like the 2 on the road to Emmaus, right? They're the typology on the 2 on the road to Emmaus, which is connected to what? Which is connected to like the resurrection of Christ and his 40 days. Interesting, right? Remember, guys, we've talked about this. You see, where is the 4 months early according to what Jesus said in John chapter 4? It's Tu B'Shavat, the New Year of Trees. But is Tu B'Shavat, the New Year of Trees, going to be the pre-trib? Or is the pre-trib still over here the week before? And this is connected to what? This would be then connected to the first fruits of the wheat harvest, of the Feast of Weeks of the wheat harvest, being the workers, and this is the pre. You see? So this is what I've been saying over the last little bit. This is our window of the pre-trib escape. The question is the pre-trib escape here, or is the pre-trib escape here? Because as I've been reading more and more, I'm still thinking it's up in this place, and this is more directly connected to the workers, the first fruits workers. As Christ was the first fruits of the barley, this remnant group chosen to serve the Lord during seals, they are also what? A first fruit. But guess what? Kind of everybody's called the first fruit if they're in Christ. So we're still kind of, it's one of these 2, right? But at the very latest right here. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is that window, that 1 week window that we're looking at. Okay? But we absolutely know the revelation right in here of being 4 months early for the Feast of Weeks. Okay? There's another thing that this could equal. I'm not going to get into it now because it's a completely different topic, but there is maybe something going on as to why the pre-trib could be here in greater detail and why this could actually be the workers. Okay? But again, we'll get into that later. So what am I showing? What are we really talking about here? We're talking about the first thing. Okay? The first thing, the beginning, whether you want to say pre-trib or remember, like I said, it not so much the pre-trib, but the workers, right? Which is the Lord coming for the 40 days after the wedding of the pre-trib. So you've got him coming in the above portion for 40 days. You've got him coming at the end of seals, at the end of the 6th year of seals. We know that what he's coming with, and we're going to talk about it. And then we know when he comes feet down on the Mount of Olives. Okay? Those are the 3 comings. So we have the Feast of Weeks. We know it's connected to bread. Where am I? We know it's connected to 2 loaves of bread. We've talked about it over the years, that it's connected to the 2 of them, which are the first 2 that the Lord meets on the road to Emmaus. He has that meal with them, and they represent who? They represent the Moses and Elijah companies of the end of days. So is there going to be a Moses type and an Elijah type of the end of days? There might be two individuals, but from those two individuals will be groups of people in them, part of them, that are part of this Moses and Elijah company of the end of days. And there's a reason why I'm here in Luke. Okay? Those who didn't taste of death shall see the kingdom of God. There's your pre-trib. Here's when he comes on the 8th day. And when he comes, then you've got the Moses and Elijah, or what we call the Moses and the Elijah company, which is the same typology of the two on the road to Emmaus at the start of the Son of Man's 40 days. Then what do we know about these guys? Well, Romans chapter 8 is a great one we've shared on many times, right? For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. This, of course, is all connected to the beginning of Genesis, Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, okay? Verse 1 and 2 of Genesis 1. These are all those who are in Christ, right? Everybody who is in Christ, Spirit-filled. But as the conversation goes on, there's a group being talked about again. It's that first fruits of the wheat harvest group, like the two on the road to Emmaus, like the Moses and the Elijah company that are going to remain to serve the Lord. And what do we know about them? Well, again, in Romans chapter 8, as we keep going, verse 16, for the Spirit itself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. Now listen to this. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. Okay? Something we've shared on numerous times. This is a power-packed verse. It tells us a lot of things about several areas. Okay? But this is specifically about a group who are in Christ, Spirit-filled, that are going to be co-heirs with Christ, that will suffer with him to be glorified with him. What was the glorification of Jesus? His resurrection. What do we know about this group? They're going to take part in the resurrection of those who will rule and reign for 1,000 years, right? We'll touch on it again, but you guys know what it is. I'm building on this, remember, for a reason. 1 Peter chapter 1. Here they are again in another conversation. In verse 4, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that fades not away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready to be revealed what? In the end of days, in the last time. It's the end of days. It's the end times. Wherein you rejoice greatly. You greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, you are in heaviness through manifold temptations. Hello. This is life right now, right? We rejoice greatly in the Lord. We are excited. It's awesome to be able to teach and to have people study and be diligent, to be a part of it, and for me and for many of you. Hopefully for all of you, right? It's exciting seeking the Lord and seeing his book open up to us. It's extremely exciting. But we're still living in this flesh that sucks. Right? Though now for a season we're in heaviness with manifold temptations, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perishes, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and glory and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. You'll remember this appearing is found in the book of Genesis only one time, and it's in the book of Revelation one time, Revelation chapter 1 verse 1. Hello. Whom having not seen, yet love, in whom though now you see him not, yet believing, you rejoice with joy unspeakable, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. Hello. When are you going to receive the end of your faith and the salvation of your souls? At the appearing of Christ. You won't need faith anymore because you'll be in the presence of your faith as a group of people reserved for the last time, who are in heaviness right now, rejoicing and seeking and diligently searching Him, watching and praying, being tested until He appears to us and we receive the end of our faith and salvation of our souls. That's the same group of people. That's the same group from Romans, that peace, that group that will serve Him in the time of the end, when He returns from the wedding. But it gets better. Let's go into 1 Peter chapter 2. This is important. Listen carefully. To whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious. Who is that living stone? Christ is, of course. So what does He call this remnant group? You also, as lively stones, are built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood. Hello. To offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. So, living stones, holy priesthood, Christ is the stone, the rock. We are little stones. Remember, Christ is the light. We will be the little lights going out. Christ is the high priest. We will be the priesthood. Okay? Little minis of what Christ has done and what Christ is. Now listen to this. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. What's Christ? Christ is high priest and king, right? And those who will be glorified with Him would be what? Priests and kings. Okay? Kings and priests. A royal priesthood. And what does He say about them? A holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praise of Him who hath called you out of the darkness into His marvelous light. That's a picture of what? The beginning of the 40 days of the Son of Man. What does He call these people? Which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God. Who were not a people of God before? Who were not a people? The Gentiles. Who are the ones called in His marvelous light? A royal priesthood, a peculiar people that are living stones, holy priesthood, serving Him. The same ones who will take part in His glory. Right? Look what Romans 9 says about the Gentiles, about a group. Now, there's everybody, but there's a group remaining, right? In that pre-trib. Romans 9, verse 24. Even us, whom He hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles, as He saith also in Hosea, I will call them my people, listen to this, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not my beloved. Who's He calling? You see that? Who's He calling? His Gentile bride. And who? Them that were not my people. Like another group of Gentiles? Like a group of Gentiles that were not a people? Where am I? Right? That were not a people, but are being called into His marvelous light? A royal priesthood? Lively stones? That's who they are. That's who this remnant group of people are. They were not my people. They became His people from among the Gentiles, and they will sacrifice themselves for Him as requested, as needed during the time of seals. They will put their necks on the line, and He's also taken His bride. Okay? Who are they? You guys know them very well. They are, of course, the church of Smyrna. I know thy works, and tribulation, and poverty. And the devil shall cast, there's that word, even from 2nd Esdras, some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and you shall have tribulation 10 days, but be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. That's the only group not hurt by the second death. And who are they? They're the ones who will take part in the resurrection at the end of tribulation in that 14 years. You're going to want to remember this. In the 14 years, okay, in that 14th year, what do we know happens? He's going to resurrect those who put their necks on the line, right? Who didn't take the mark of the beast nor his image. They're going to be, remember, they're the ones, they're the Smyrna group who put their necks on the line. That remnant group of workers who are sacrificing themselves, doing the work of the Lord during this time, who will take part in his glory. And what was his glory? His glory was, of course, the resurrection. Without his resurrection, he would have just been another guy claiming to be God. It was the resurrection that sealed the deal. This group, who are the Smyrna group, are these people. And what does it say? And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years, but the rest of the dead, so everybody else that died, except for them, lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. Now, when I say them, there's also those of the Old Testament, right? Those that had the promise of their millennial reign, the promise of that peace on earth, okay? The old Hebrews, right? And it says, listen to this. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that has part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power. See that? That's this group right here. Shall not be hurt of the second death. That's this group right here. These are the ones serving the Lord, who are called little stones, okay? Who will take part in the resurrection. And what else were they? What else do they represent? Loaves of bread. 2 loaves of bread. The Elijah and Moses company. The 2 on the road to Emmaus, as we've taught over the years. They are the first fruits of the wheat harvest. As Christ is the first fruits, these are the secondary, if you will, first fruits. And they will serve Christ to take part in his glory, which was his resurrection. And what will they be? Won't be hurt by the second death, but shall be what? Priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Reign means king. Priests, of course, priests. So remember, this first group that the Lord is going to meet with first for 40 days, as he's warning about what's coming against Jerusalem, as he said he would for 40 days, as he's doing signs, wonders, and miracles. And once the 40 days are over, this group, who are called stones, lively stones, right? As Christ is the rock, these guys are the little rocks. But they're also what? Bread. They're the first fruits of the wheat harvest. They represent the 2 loaves of bread. Okay? Not hard to track. We've understood this. We've just spoken of it differently. That, we know that they're the little lights. We know that they're taking part in the glory with the resurrection at the end. We know that they represent the first fruits of the wheat harvest, as we've taught all this time. We're now just putting it together to say, wait a second, yeah, they're lively stones, so they're stones, and what else are they? They're the loaves of bread. Okay? That's one. I want you to remember that part. Now we'll go to the next part. What do we know about the second time Christ is coming? What is he doing? What happens the second time? Well, if we come to Revelation chapter 6, we know that the world is freaking out. At the end of Revelation chapter 6, everybody, all the kings of the earth, free men, bondmen, mighty men, all of them, saying, rocks and mountains fall on us, okay, and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall stand? This is the wrath of the Lamb, right? Why? What are they seeing coming to the earth that's freaking them out? Well, it's something we've taught on numerous times, haven't we? Because it's incredible once you realize it. What do we know about Daniel chapter 2? Here comes the stone again, right? But this time he's not coming as just a stone. He's coming with what? The stone that becomes a great mountain and fills the earth. When he comes and smites the image, which is the picture of Nebuchadnezzar, the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, which is the beast with the 10 horns. The same means the same thing. What do we know happens? The stone that was cut without hand comes and crashes and breaks it all into pieces, destroys the beast and the 10 kings and all that came against him. Again, something else we've shown, something else that we've shown in the teachings. It's not far away. Again, something else we've shown in the teachings in 2nd Esdra, when what? When he shall come on Mount Zion, and Zion shall come to be made manifest to all people, excuse me, prepared and built. Okay? We know what this is. We know it's connected to the mid-trib mark portion. They will see this coming before the great multitude happens, about give or take 6 months later. 6 or 7 months, 5 to 7 months later, right? As you saw, a mountain carved without hands. This is the same story. Okay? It's the same story. So what he's coming on? He's coming with a high mountain, right? With a great mountain. He's coming with paradise, as you guys know. When we come to Daniel 7, what do we know about him? It says, in Daniel 7, we saw the beast, right? The 4th beast, which is the beast of Revelation. He has the 10 horns. He's going to be ruling and reigning for what we know is his 42 months, till I beheld the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did come. We see the thousands of thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And then what do we see? The beast is killed. The main beast, right? The beast and the horns are killed. That's what we know. We've talked about that numerous times as well. The rest of the beasts have their lives prolonged for a season and time, but they lose all their dominion, right? It's that 4th beast, which is the beast of Revelation 13 and 17. He's killed with the 10 toes or the 10 horns. And then what happens? Who's the one that shows up at this time? Well, it's the same story at the end of Revelation 6. I saw in the night vision, behold, one like unto the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all people and nations and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. So he's given what? Kingdom and dominion at the coming of the Lord, when he comes with what? With heavenly Mount Zion. Okay, he's coming with Mount Zion. Remember this in the chapters to years. Psalms 24. In verse 3, who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord? Or who shall stand in his holy place? Remember this? At the time of the fullness, the time of the great multitude, rapture. And then you got those who are going to make their way to Jerusalem, right? What on earth is the mountain of the Lord going to look like? We've talked about it before. There's a reason at the end of Revelation 6, everybody's in a panic, because they're seeing this come. And they're going to gather together, those 10 kings with the beast, who the beast gave them authority, and they give their power unto the beast. They will all come to fight against the Lord when he comes on heavenly Mount Zion, being in an absolute freak out, seeing this mountain thing coming down. We know what this mountain thing is, don't we? John chapter 14, same story in the chapters to years. What did Jesus say? In the chapters to years, this is the 7th year of seals. 21 chapters to John, 7 easy, 7 of seals, 7 of trumpets. This would be the 7th year of seals. The Lord is here on Mount Zion. And what is Mount Zion? Well, look at what he said. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. Remember what 2nd Esdra said? A place furnished and prepared, which you find only in Mark's story about going to the upper room and prepare a place, furnished and prepared. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, what does he say? I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Why? Because at the end of the 6th year of seals, he's coming with heavenly Mount Zion. He's coming with paradise. That's why everybody's freaking out. So he's coming with this great mountain, this high and great mountain. And he's going to receive the mid-trib great multitude rapture 5 to 7 months later, in the 7th year of seals. And they're going to be taken where? To the place that he prepared for them, which is paradise, which is why 2 Corinthians chapter 12 said the first one goes to the third heaven, the second group goes to paradise, and then the third time, as Paul says, he's coming to them and not to be a burden. So a taking to the third heaven, a taking to the paradise, and a return. That's pre, mid, and post. So we see what this first one was, with stones and wheat, loaves of bread, being the first fruits of the wheat harvest with those 2 loaves of bread. We see the second one, it's him coming with heavenly Mount Zion, a great and high mountain. He receives the great multitude to him in the midst of the 7th year. And then we see here in Zechariah chapter 8, just to confirm it, Zechariah chapter 8, 14 chapters of Zechariah. Here we are in about that 8th year as trumpets is starting. The Lord is no longer jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion as he was in chapter 1. And what does he say? I am returned unto Zion and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. So it's a great and high mountain. Okay? What's going to happen next? You guys know the story. What happens next? You go down a little further from Zechariah chapter 8, and the rebuilding of the city streets and temple is now going to start. Right? Verse 9. Zechariah chapter 8. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, let your hands be strong, you that hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets, which were in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid, the house of the Lord of hosts was laid, that the temple might be built. So a foundation had to have been laid in the midst of seals, which we know it is, and according to 1 Kings 6, which we'll touch on, and according to Zechariah chapter 4, the foundation was laid by the 4th year, but not the rest of the temple and nothing else. Okay? It gets interrupted and so forth. So now the Lord is returned on heavenly Mount Zion. The great multitude rapture has come in. The true line of Israel that's still around, we don't know how to identify. The Lord will. And Judah, they will make their way back to Jerusalem in all of this. Okay? And there will be a rebuilding now of the temple that will start. And he says in verse 10, but before these days there was no man for hire, nor any hire of beast, neither was there any peace, because it's taken at the red horse rider, to him that went out or came in because of the affliction. For I set every one against his neighbor. That's the red horse rider. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, people against people. So now what does he do? House of Judah and the remnant of the house of Israel that are still going to be there. It would appear that there are true house of Israel besides the Gentiles that are grafted in. They're still the natural branch, remember? Besides Judah. Judah is the main. Israel is a branch, and those branches were broken off, and the Gentiles grafted in, and he will be able to graft Israel back in as well. Okay? Which we read in, you can read in Romans. And then he says, but let your hands be strong. So what comes next, once he has come with heavenly Mount Zion, that great and high mountain, which is paradise, gathered the great multitude, gathered remnant Israel and Judah back, they're now going to start rebuilding the temple, the city, and the streets. Okay? We see this in 1 Kings chapter 6. Chapter 6. 1 Kings 6, verse 37 and 38. We see that the foundation was done in the 4th year. Remember, for those who are newer, was, is, and is to come. Ecclesiastes 1:9 tells us this very clearly. That which was shall be, and that which is shall be. Nothing new under the sun. Meaning, in the end of days, in the shall be of the is to come, the Old Testament has typologies of things that will be in the is to come, and in the New Testament will be things that will play out in the is to come. And that's what you're seeing here. Another picture of this. Proving what? The 14 years in this 10 and a half years. So in the 4th year, the foundation is laid. And in the 11th year, what's the 11th year? As soon as 10 is done, the 11th year is started. So in the 11th year, I always say when it's in, you could say about, the middle of the year, give or take, right? In the 11th year, which would be a total of what? From the beginning to the 4th year, well, that's 4. To in the 11th year, that's about 10 and a half years. Was the house finished? We know this in the revelation of the end of days. It's like Psalms 90 and 10. 70 to 80, then soon. So you got 70 to 80, that's 10 years. Then soon, that's a short period of time of a few months. We say about 6 months. There's 10 and a half. And then what happens? Then they fly away on eagle's wings into the wilderness for the final 3.5 years, which is time, comma, and times, comma, and half a time. 1 plus 2 plus a half, 3.5 years. 14 years, of which this is 10 and a half. What happens at the end of 10 and a half? The temple's been rebuilt. So halfway through the 7 years of trumpets, the temple is now complete. It started around the 8th year, and it's done by the middle of the 11th year, or about 10 and a half years in. Okay? Again, what's this time? Until what? Until Satan is then cast down. Satan loses his battle against Michael and his angels, and Satan against his angels, and Satan and his angels are cast down to the earth. This is that midpoint of trumpets, that time we talk about all the time, that 10 and a half years, once the temple has been rebuilt, and he's coming down, the accuser, the brethren, it's going to be a worse time than ever. He knows he has but a short time. That short time is 2.5 years of that final 3.5 years. Right? We see it here in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 12. How long will it be until the end of this, right? And in midway through Daniel 12, verse 7, it says that it shall be for a time, times, and a half. There's no and here. So there's no addition like in Revelation 12, in Revelation 12:14. In Revelation 12:14, there's the word and here. That's because that group taken away into the wilderness is gone until after the end of the 14th year. But this is Satan's time. In the last 3.5 years of the 14 years, Satan is given a time, comma, times. That means 1, 2, plus a half. That's 2.5 years. There's no addition. It's like saying 1, 2, 3, 4 plus a half. That's 4.5. Okay? If you put an and, then it's 1 plus 2 plus 3, that's 6, plus a half, that's 6.5. Okay? There's no and. Satan, in the short time he has, is the 2.5 years. And it's going to begin from about the time that the temple is done, and then Satan's cast down. This is the time when the pit is opened. Okay? Until he's got what? Till he's able to scatter them, like Revelation chapter 10 says, and then everything is finished. Okay? And then what happens? Well, we know there's events that happen at the end of the 13th year, and then the Lord is going to return at the beginning of the 7th trumpet. Okay, that's why it said here, till all these things shall be finished. When are they finished? They're finished at the end of the second woe, which is the 6th trumpet. And then the Lord, at the start, as soon as the 7th angel sounds, as Revelation 10 says, as soon as the 7th angel sounds, the mystery is finished. Because why? The Lord is now returning feet down on the Mount of Olives. And listen what it says about it. Now the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. So what did we see in this process? We saw then the temple being built, and then Satan coming, taking everything over, right? And the beast coming out of the pit, and all those coming out of the pit and taking everything over. There's a war for 2.5 years that Satan has in his short time. And then the Lord returning then, feet down on the Mount of Olives, and all the kingdoms of the world are now his. So we've seen three pieces, haven't we? We've seen three parts. One, which is bread and stone, right? The two loaves of bread and the stone. We've seen who are stones, right? We've seen when he comes with the great mountain, the great and high mountain. We've seen when the temple is then rebuilt. And when the temple is rebuilt and Satan coming down, being cast down and the pit opening and taking over the temple control and war against the two witnesses, until then the Lord returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives, when all the kingdoms of the world will then become his. Because there are three comings of the Lord, right? You want to remember that. So what happens now at the seventh trumpet? Where are we? The seventh trumpet, as soon as it begins to sound, is the beginning of the 14th year. The Lord returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives at the beginning of the 14th year. Here he is right here. And when does it say? In Matthew 24, verse 29, it says immediately after the tribulation of those days. You see, Mark's doesn't say that. When you understand the differences in the Gospels, it starts to get very, very clear. Mark says after that tribulation. Matthew says immediately after the tribulation of those days. Why would it say immediately? Because the seventh trumpet is going to sound immediately after. And as soon as it begins to sound, the mystery is over. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. Remember, for those that don't know, this is a great one to show. When you don't use something like a Strong's Concordance, like I use here with this program called eSword, you have the Strong's Concordance at your fingertips, and it changes your understanding of Revelation. It explodes once you understand how to use it. Because look at what it says. Then shall they see the coming of the Son of Man coming in the clouds. Well, when you go to Luke's discourse, Mark's discourse, Matthew's discourse, which is part of that intro series of the difference in the Gospels and who they're speaking to, you're going to see that the word in only in Matthew, is the word on. Because this is when he returns on the clouds, and everybody sees him. And when will they do it? When is this going to happen? At the great sound of a trumpet, which is the seventh trumpet, brothers and sisters. It's at the seventh trumpet when this happens. Okay? And when this happens, what is it? Well, it's the coming of the Son of Man. This word for coming is found only in Matthew's discourse. Out of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's the only time it's ever used in the Gospels. And it's only found in Matthew 24. Because this word for coming is the literal coming of the Lord when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. When he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, this is why we have it'll be as it was in the days of Noah. Because the days of Noah represent the final 14th year of tribulation when the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. Okay? You guys will remember this. Remember when we discovered years ago, man, it feels like a long time now. But I remember, and I spoke about it not too long ago. I remember years ago when we had a brother here that I used to talk to a lot. And I was telling him, I know that there are two stories in the story of Noah in Genesis 7 and 8. And the clue that did it for me, the hint, was that there were 40 days and 40 nights, and then 40 days. Why the difference of this conversation of 40 days and 40 nights compared to 40 days? And I just racked my brain, and I was pondering it and praying over it, and it took a long time. Like, I want to say like maybe even 2 years. It might not have been that long, but it sure felt like it. It was well over a year, closer to 2 years for sure. And then it hit me. And for anybody that's been around for a little bit now, You already understand. You already know what it is, right? We know that there is a big picture in the story of Noah that relates to the entirety of the end of days, which means you have which we know is the 40 days, right? The 40 days represents when the Son of Man is coming for 40 days after the wedding. And then you have the raven sent out in chapter 8, and then the dove, which is a picture of the 50th day. And then you've got 7 days, and then you've got 7 more days, like the 7 years of seals and the 7-year trumpets and everything that we've broken down. But there's another picture which starts as all of it just playing out as the final year of tribulation. That starts with the 40 days and the 40 nights. And the 40 days and 40 nights in the end of days picture, it says was the second month, 17th day. It doesn't mean that in the end of days, it's going to play out on the second month, 17th day. The point here is manyfold in relation to how to count the years and to be able to track them throughout the millenniums. But what it's giving us these dates here for the end of days is because when you go to chapter 8, it then says it's the second month, 27th day. So it means that Noah's days took 1 year and 10 months. Okay? So that final year, that final 14th year, is going to be 1 year and an additional 10 more days. Those are the days of Noah of Matthew 24, and the reason they're only found in Matthew's discourse at the coming of the Son of Man. Now, when we go to Luke chapter 4, we know Luke in a variety of ways. One is that there's an incredible mystery that we revealed years ago, and we still talk about it every once in a while, is Luke chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Luke chapter 1 is a prophetic picture of the pre-trib, like those like John who are in Christ, spirit-filled, right? Or spirit-filled, and you got his birth. And that's a picture of the pre-trib. And then you've got to the 8th day circumcision. You go to Luke chapter 2, and you got the 40 days of the Son of Man. Right? His 40 days at his birth, and you got those 40 days. So on the 8th day, starts the 40 days. And then you go to chapter 3, and it's a picture prophetically built within as the end of 6 years of seals at the coming of the Lord, like the end of Revelation chapter 6. And then you come to Luke chapter 4, and you've got the story of the final year when the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. Okay? We've talked about this and there's a great video that has hands being held up with one doing a number, one finger, one holding up 2 fingers, another hand holding up 3, and another one holding up 4, and it's called Luke in Order. It's an incredible revelation. But there's always other things and deeper things that you could pull from it. For example, we know Genesis in order, chapter 1 to chapter 21, revealing the same type of thing that the 21 chapters of John does in the end of days over the 7 easy, then 7 years of seals, 7 years of trumpets. Yet within those chapters, we can go, for example, to chapter 16 and 17 to 21 and see the story of Abraham having Ishmael. And he was 86. And then chapter 7, it's 17, it's 13 years later. So even though there's a big overall picture story in the 21 chapters, all throughout those 21 chapters, there's other insights prophetically within it, just like what we did with chapter 7 to 8 in relation to the story of Noah being a pre-trib picture in an overall picture, and also being the final 14th year of tribulation. That's what you're going to see here when we get into this with Luke chapter 4. Okay? We understand Luke 1, 2, 3, 4 in the prophetic picture as the Luke in order, but we're now going to look at it from another perspective and just look at it from the picture of the conversation taking place in Luke chapter 4. And it gets pretty wild. It's awesome, awesome to see. And you're going to understand immediately why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. So what do we see in Luke? 40 days. Interesting how Luke knows all things in order, and it's 40 days. When Luke's portion is done, the pre-trib goes. Then what's the story? Well, then it starts with Mark's story. And in Mark's story, we have the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We have the story of John. And then we get the story of his 40 days into the wilderness. Again, interesting, it's mentioned as 40 days. It's not 40 days and 40 nights. Well, why not? Because they're referring in an end time understanding. When you understand that Luke's is done, the pre-trib has happened, and the Son of Man is coming for 40 days, we know that it's the beginning of the end of days. And you've got the time of Mark now starting, you see? The 40 days of the Son of Man is the first seal of the white horse rider. Mark's group is going to be here, and Matthew's group is going to be here. It's going to be the beginning of the end of days. Well, when we go to Luke chapter 1, remember this in Luke chapter 1, verse 1 and 2? For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order a declaration of those things which are most surely believed among us, even as they delivered them unto us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. He's talking about Mark and Matthew. You can probably even say John. But in the Synoptic Gospels, he's talking about Mark and Matthew. He's saying what they delivered unto us was great, and they were eyewitnesses, and they declared these things in the order. But then what does he say? Verse 3, it seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write unto thee in order. Man, that's a bold statement, right? So what is Luke telling us? Luke understands all things in order. And it just so happens that from this statement, we get the revelation of chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 of Luke being a picture of the 40 days, the end of seals, and the end of trumpets. That's wild. But this is now going to go a step deeper. This is going to go a step deeper now. We're not going to look at the in order. We're going to look at two specific chapters, one in Luke and one in Matthew. And you'll understand why in a moment. How many temptations did Christ have? Satan tempted Jesus 3 times. You know, had it dawned on me to look at it and count, any one of us who had seen it would have been like, oh, there must be something there. It was just like our brother. I always forget which one, but I'm certain it was one of our brothers, Samuel, who first brought to my attention Deuteronomy 16, that there were 3 times to go to the Lord. Right? 3 times to go to the Lord. That the men were to appear and not come empty-handed, right? And we know what their order was. I mean, it was incredible. Because when you understand all these things happen in 3, and you see a story of something happening with 3, I can guarantee you 100% of the time that there's going to be detail of a pre, mid, and post, or connected to the 3 comings of the Lord. In every case. Well, here's another 3. And this is what our sister Pietra had sent me and said, you know, I've noticed that there's differences in the 2 places that talk about Satan's temptations against Christ. You know, she said, go and look and, you know, see what you can pull out of it. And I'm glad she did, because there was a reason why I was bringing all of this to you first. So you can understand these different portions. And again, a final recap is to tell you guys that what are these different portions? The first one, at the coming of the Son of Man, is the first fruits of the wheat harvest, which is loaves of bread. Okay? Loaves of bread, those with leaven. They are his living stones, as he is the stone, who will serve him as high priests and kings, right? Who will serve him as priests and kings, right? And be part of the resurrection, which means those living stones in the final year will be part of the resurrection. And we see that in Revelation 20. But what else do we know? We also know that the Lord is coming with heavenly Mount Zion, a great and high mountain that he's coming on at the end of seals. We know that the temple will be rebuilt, and that when Satan is cast down and the beast comes out of it, that they will take over as the war breaks out for 2.5 years against the witness, and he will go in, and the beast will declare himself God in the temple, because everything is given unto Satan in a moment of time. That moment of time is the end of days. Satan hasn't been cast down yet. It was Lucifer who was cast down in the beginning, not Satan. Satan's still doing his thing and accusing us day and night until mid-trumpets when he's cast down. It's awesome stuff. Okay? And then what? Well, and then what happens is the Lord, as we saw in Revelation 11, all of the kingdoms of the earth are his. So there are 3 comings with 3 groupings of events of a people that he's trained up and that he will open the rest of the revelation, the word of God to. They will be living and moving in the word of God by the Spirit, who are living stones and the 2 loaves of bread. There's a high mountain of the Lord when he comes, which is him coming with paradise. And finally him returning feet down when all the kingdoms of the world become his. I'm recapping this all for a reason. Because Satan tempted it 3 times. And in 2 chapters, they're spoken of differently. Check this out. Let's go to Luke chapter 4. Remember, Luke knows all things in order. I just deleted it. Luke knows all things in order. Okay? Remember that. Listen to this. In Luke chapter 4, it's the temptation of Christ, or the temptations of Christ by Satan. How many were there? There were 3. Look at how it starts. Jesus being 40 days tempted of the devil. How does the end of days start? After the pre-trib, you've got the coming of the Son of Man for 40 days. 40 days and 40 nights? Nope. 40 days. Remember the picture of Genesis, right? The picture of Genesis, there was a 40 days and 40 nights, but is this the one that we count towards the end of days as the coming 40 days of the Son of Man at the beginning? No. We've always counted the 40 days and 40 nights as the relation to when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, which is part of the whole story of the 1 year and 10 days that plays out when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. There will be an event of 40 days and 40 nights. This 40 days is the 40 days that relates to the overall big picture of the above and then 14 years. At the end of the 40 days of the Son of Man, the raven spirit is sent out. Jerusalem gets compassed about. Remember that? On the 50th day, the dove comes, and the dove will anoint that remnant group of workers. So the Lord was here for 40 days with them, warning, downloading them, giving them the revelation. They go to wait in Jerusalem for Acts 2.0 when the Holy Ghost will anoint them, and then they will go out from Jerusalem, just as Luke 24 says, and it's only in Luke, at the end of Luke, not in Mark or Matthew either. And then what happens? The dove goes back to heaven, and then you have the stayed yet 7 days, and this word stayed means tribulation. This word stayed means simply stayed, as the definition of stayed would be. 7 days is what? As 7 years. In the 7th year, what happens? The plucked off, the rapture, the harpazo. Then you've got 7 more days as 7 more years, which are trumpets. Hello. It's incredible when you could see it and understand it. So we know that the 40 days is this big picture in the above, and then 7 and 7 of days as years. But the 40 days and the 40 nights is prophetically to when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, and the 40 days and 40 nights is the beginning of the 1 year and 10 days. That brings us right here in Genesis 8, verse 14, the second month, 27th day. 1 year and 10 days long. You guys know the reason for it, right? We'll touch on it again at the end. So there's a reason why Luke's has 40 days. And what are the end of days? You got the pre-trib, but we're talking about the events of Christ. Okay? You've got his 40 days. Are you ready for this? Look what happens next. Let's go into eSword and have a look at this. It's pretty wild. When I saw it, I had no idea what to expect. I hadn't even realized there were 3 temptations. We know the temptations of Christ, but it never dawned on me that there were 3. Listen to what it says. Verse 3, Luke 4. And the devil said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, command this stone. Command this stone. Wait a second. Stone. Jesus is the stone, right? He is this stone. And we see that Jesus is the living stone. Look at that. G3037. G3037. And remember what it says? Ye also are lively stones. Right? The holy priesthood, that Smyrna group with the Lord. When he's here for 40 days. And then when he leaves, they're the ones that will receive the anointing that will go out and serve him. Yes, there's the apostle group as well. That's a separate group first, right? And what does it say about these stones? They're the same kind of stones as Christ. They're just the little stones, right? G3037, G3037. And in Luke chapter 4, we see what these stones were. And he commanded this stone that it be made bread. Bread? Command this stone that it be made bread. You mean like a loaf of bread raised up because it's with leaven? Who are the stones? Who are the loaves of bread? The loaves of bread are the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Christ is the first fruit. This remnant group is the first fruits of the wheat harvest, who are called what? Lively stones. The little stones, as Christ is the stone. Wait, so he's coming for 40 days. They're with him. They're anointed. They're with him for 40 days. And then you have the story of the stone and the bread. Command this stone to be made bread. But remember, they were bread first, weren't they? It's like they're bread and they're stones, are they not? This remnant Smyrna group are bread and stone. It's literally what they're called. And Jesus answered and said to him that it is written that man shall not live by bread alone. Okay? By this first fruits. They're not going to live by bread alone, but listen to this. By every word of God. Do you guys remember what happens? I mentioned it. What happens to the bread, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, that remnant Smyrna group who are going to serve the Lord? They're going to be going out by every word of God. You don't believe me? Let's go back to Luke 24. Remember in the prophetic picture, the resurrection story in Luke is a picture of the start of the 40 days of the Son of Man? Do you remember what he tells this group? Where is it? 40 something, right? In 44 and 45. Luke 24, 44, and 45. And he said unto them, remember, you don't find this in Mark or Matthew. It's only in Luke. What does he say? And he said unto them, These are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which are written in the law of Moses and in the prophets and in the Psalms concerning me. Crazy that these are the books we've gone through now, eh? Wild. And then what does it say? Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the scriptures. Wait, you mean first fruits of the wheat harvest, the 2 loaves, like the 2 on the road to Emmaus, the Elijah Moses company that will serve the Lord as the Smyrna group, who are called the lively stones, the royal priesthood, who will be kings and priests in the end, to be resurrected, having sacrificed themselves for Christ, to bring in the great multitude, who have the understanding of Scripture be revealed to them, not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. And then what happens? Well, remember, Luke knows all things in order. Listen to what he says next. In Luke chapter 4, verse 5. And the devil taking him up into a high mountain. Whoa, wait a second. When's the second time the Lord comes? He's coming with the great mountain, right? Holy, heavenly, high Mount Zion. He takes him into a high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world. Wait a second. Didn't Daniel chapter 7, when it says when he's given the kingdoms and dominion and so forth? So when he comes on the high mountain at the end of seals with heavenly Mount Zion, paradise, the place prepared, and he's given the kingdoms in the world, right? And he's the dominion and kingdoms of the world. Here's Satan trying to offer him the next piece. So what's Satan offering him? He's offering him to trick him from that first remnant worker group when he comes at the beginning. Then what does he do? Then he's trying to deceive to give him this great and high mountain that he can have dominion and kingdom over. When did Satan show it to him? In a moment of time. Do you know that this phrase is only found once and it's only in Luke? Look at that. Meaning what? Meaning in Luke's story of the 3 temptations, he's showing it to him and he's playing it out in order of the end of days, because Luke knows all things in order. But remember what we said? In a moment of time. Meaning, when he's told him these things, Satan didn't yet have these things. He was showing him a future time. And he was trying to corrupt Jesus. Why would he even bother? Isn't that crazy? That shows the arrogance and pride and everything of the enemy. Like, it's ridiculous to think of, right? So, and for some reason they think they're going to be victorious. It's ridiculous. So he's showing him these things in a moment of time, a point of time. It's a future time because he wasn't yet given these things. Because remember, he's still up in heaven as well. He's still up there accusing us. Sure, he can come down through the Spirit and manipulate, and like as the other angels and so forth do, right? But he's showing these things in a moment of time because it's future. You do not find this anywhere else in Scripture. I think I pulled it up. I think so. Yeah, moment in time, right there, for this word moment. Is it the only time moment is used in Scripture? Nope. But it's the only time that's connected to the one in Luke chapter 4. It's its own unique word. And then, so you see what he's doing, right? He's trying to take away the blessing of the stones and the bread. He's trying to take away the blessing of when he's coming on heavenly Mount Zion to say, hey, I can give you this. And then he says, in verse 6, it says, and the devil said unto him, all this power will I give thee, and the glory of them. For that is delivered unto me, listen to this, and to whomsoever I will to give it. Again, this is only found in Luke's. Who does he end up giving it to? Of course, we know he's giving it to the beast, right? Like, why would he even bother tempting Christ with this. It sounds so absurd from our perspective when we understand, doesn't it? It sounds absolutely absurd when you realize all throughout prophecy in the Old Testament is talking about the beast system that's coming, knowing that he's going to be the one that he's going to give it to. Isn't that exactly what we know is coming? How about this? What if we go to Revelation chapter 2 and read what it says with Pergamum? Pergamum said, I know where Satan's seat is, right? I know where Satan's seat is, and where Satan dwells. And if we go to, where is it? Where Satan dwells. Revelation 13. What do we see happen with the beast? Okay? So in the same church where it says where Satan's seat is, and it suddenly talks about Balaam and Balak, which is a picture of the false prophet and the false the beast from Numbers 24. We come to Revelation 13, and what do we read in Revelation 13? Where is it? Give him his seat. Right here. In verse 2. Okay, and a mouth and a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. What did Satan just do? What did he just say? I have the ability to give it to who I will. And what does he do? He's going to give this seed of his to the beast. Of course Christ wasn't going to take it. You already knew it. It was written in all the prophecies even way before that. Verse 7 of Luke 4. If thou therefore will worship me, all shall be yours. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written that thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Now what happens, guys? Doesn't the temple get rebuilt? Now, what's the picture here? From the end of seals, what happens at the end of seals? The Lord comes on heavenly Mount Zion, a great and high mountain. He's just taken them up to a great and high mountain. And what comes next? Well, in the end of days, the Lord is now here on heavenly Mount Zion. That's been given to him. He has kingdom and dominion. He didn't need it from Satan. He has his workers who are the stones and who are bread. So the Lord gives them that. The Lord gives them to him. And he then comes with heavenly Mount Zion. He didn't need it from Satan. He already was getting it, right? It was already his. And then what happens is trumpets start. Mount Zion is there, and the city streets and temple get built. Until the 10.5-year mark, the temple is built, and then Satan's cast down. Hello. Well, look what it says next. Luke 4:9. And he brought him to Jerusalem and set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down from thence, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge over thee, and keep thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. And Jesus answering said unto him, It is said that thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And then what happened? Satan has ended his temptation and departed for a season. Isn't that crazy? What did we just see? We just saw the coming of the Son of Man for 40 days. He's going to be with his stones, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, the leavened 2 loaves of bread, who are the little stones that then would be going out. These are those who belong to the Lord. Remember who these people are. Remember how powerful and how frightening this means for what this means for these people, guys. What did it say these people were? It says, and if children, then heirs of God. Okay? Heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. You're going to be a co-heir with Christ. Christ is the heir, and we are co-heirs with him. We're talking in the prophetic in the end of days, that remnant group, because they will serve the Lord and do the things Christ did to bring in his people. And for that work, for that suffering, they will be glorified together. As Christ was resurrected, so shall they be resurrected. That is way too much to try to comprehend in our little minds what this means. To be chosen as a remnant to serve the Lord as this group of Smyrna in the end of days. That's why I'm not saying I'm fully certain it's us. No, I don't know. I have a belief based on the revelation and things that have been revealed and understood that have never been revealed and understood. We've proven it over almost 8 years. Why would you give a team the playbook and then take them out and bring in another team when the game's about to start? This is crazy to think about. And it's such a big deal. It was a temptation that Satan was tempting him with. This group of people that are stones and bread. Craziness. This is all in order. To the end of seals, him coming on heavenly Mount Zion, to the temple being built, and when he's cast down, then the temple is what? Then they take it over. There's war and they take it over until the Lord returns feet down. That's why it's in order. Luke knows all things in order. And it just so happens that as we know Luke in order as well, as I said earlier, with chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and what they play out as, it's wild. Because chapter 4, we know, is a prophetic picture of the final year when the Lord returns. And then Satan departs for a season, which is the millennial reign, and everybody is glorifying the Lord and crying out as he goes around teaching and all of this stuff going on. And then we get the conversation of what? Where Jesus proclaims the Jubilee. Remember that? Right here. In Luke 4, 18, 19, 20, right? Verse 19, verse 18, Spirit of the Lord is upon me, the recovering of the sight of the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, and he closed the book. This is what? This, of course, is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 61, which is his declaration of the Jubilee. We know this in multiple levels. We know this in the is of him having declared it, what was it, in around 30 or 31 AD, whatever it was? And why was this important for us to understand? Let's go to it real quick. I mean, it was crazy to understand this, okay? When Jesus declares the Jubilee in Luke 4, verse 18 through 21 from Isaiah 61, he would have declared it around right here at the feast, in the Day of Atonement, right here, is where he would have been saying that in 30 AD, saying the words of Luke chapter 4, 18 through 21. In 30 AD. That's how we tracked the Jubilee all the way through all of the years, continuing the count of 7 times 7, and the first year of the next 7 is the Jubilee, and that makes the Jubilee 2039, from 2039 to 2040 is the final year of Jubilee. You go back 14 years, and we end up at the fall of 2025, but that's not it's a start, but it's not what you think. The above 50 days would begin in this 50-day time frame to the start of Nisan of 2026. There's a dual calendar working, and it's a sowing and reaping year with a year count from Nisan to Nisan. This is 7 times 7, 7 times 7, 7 times 7, right? With the Jubilees. This is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, never stopping. Okay? That count from Christ equals this as the Jubilee. From the year 2030, at his decree of the Jubilee, right here. So, what do we have from it? We have the is revelation of when it was decreed. We have the is to come revelation of Luke 1, 2, 3, 4 in order, and this being a picture of the final year. And now within Luke chapter 4, we have the revelation as revealed over all of these years being proved out to us again in the 40 days, in the remnant group, when he comes on heavenly Mount Zion, and when the temple is being rebuilt and finished, and Satan being cast down, and they step in to claim it as their own. Until he's defeated and he's gone for a season. Isn't that wild? I thought that was so awesome. So awesome. But Mark has nothing in his gospel except chapter 1, verse 12 and 13. And immediately the Spirit driveth him into the wilderness, and he was there in the wilderness 40 days. Remember, because it's a picture of the beginning of tribulation. Here we are in Mark chapter 1. Tempted by Satan, and was with the wild beasts, and the angels ministered unto him. That's all you get. So you don't get the temptation in Mark. Now, watch what happens when we go to Matthew's gospel. There's a reason why I said some things earlier that I was sharing. There's a reason I went into Genesis 7 and Genesis 8 to show you that storyline. Okay? We know this 40-day picture as after the 7 days, 40 days begin. When the 40 days are done, chapter 8, the raven goes out, which is the Antichrist spirit. Then the Holy Ghost goes out, and then, boom, the 14 years start. There's your word state I was telling you about earlier, if you didn't know this. This first word for state is tribulation. It's pain, sorrow, torment, all of those things. And it's the start of the 14 years, 7 days, and 7 days as 7 years and 7 years. Okay? That is the overall big picture, which is why you've got the 40 days mentioned. But then there's also a picture of the final year. I want to make sure you catch this. I want to make sure you realize what I'm telling you here. Luke starts with 40 days and has everything in order. Everything in order of the events that take place over what? His 40 days until his return, right? And the temple being rebuilt, and then Satan gone for a season, which is the millennial reign. Don't you find that fascinating? It's the story we've been teaching for several years now of the big picture of the story of Noah, of the 40 days, or of the above 50 days, right? The 7, the 40, the raven, the dove, and then 7 and 7. It's the story of the end of days in the big picture. But we also know that that's the way Luke reveals everything, because he knows everything in order. But in Matthew's gospel, what do we know in Matthew's gospel? That the days of Noah are represented as the final year. Hello. Right? As the final year, which is the picture of Noah being 1 year and 10 days that we've shared on numerous times. And why is it 1 year and 10 days for this final year as Noah's? That final 14th year? Because the 49th year, this 7 of trumpets, or the 14 years of tribulation since it started, which is the final 49th year, only the 49th year is 1 year and 10 days long, because on the 10th day of atonement, which is 10 days later, from Feast of Trumpets to Feast of Trumpets on the sowing and reaping side, 10 days later is when the trumpet of the Jubilee is sounded. It is 1 year and 10 days. It doesn't happen in any of the other 48 years. Only the 49th year has another 10 days for the Jubilee's trumpet to sound. Hello. And what do we see with Matthew? The final one is the picture of the story in Genesis 7 and 8 as the final year and 10 days picture of Matthew 24 at the coming of the Son of Man when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives as lightning from one end unto the other. Well, what if we go to Matthew chapter 4 and let's have a read and see how Matthew chapter 4 lays out the wording of the temptations of Christ. Are you ready for this? If Luke's was the whole picture of the end of days, then Matthew's, so Luke's is the whole picture, he knows it all in order, and it was all laid out in order, and it was a picture of all the end of days, the events of the coming of the Lord, to Genesis 7 and 8 as the overall big picture of the end of days, as Luke knows in order, and Matthew's as Matthew 24, when the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives in that final 14th year, which is 1 year and 10 days long to the Jubilee, is the story of Genesis and the story of Noah, which was a year and 10 days long. Which means, what are the chances that Matthew chapter 4, in his conversation, is him here and having had that power and authority that is now his, not in a moment in time like Luke said, but in the actual time and in that final year as the final year plays out. If you recall, Zechariah 14 and the beginning of it, there was a battle at the end of seals, and now there's going to be another battle, and it's going to be when the Lord returns in his day, feet down on the Mount of Olives, and great war is going to take place. Hello. Hello. The wine press is coming, right? Well, let's see how Matthew 4 and the temptations of Christ are laid out in Matthew's gospel. Are you ready for this? Matthew 4 verse 2. 40 days and 40 nights. Boom, right off the bat. Right off the bat. In case you didn't catch that, remember how it plays out in the final year as the second month, 17th day to the second month, 27th day, 1 year and 10 days later? It starts with what? 40 days and 40 nights. How did Matthew 4 start in verse 2? 40 days and 40 nights. How many times have we explained that the differences in these wordings always reveals something more? Do we understand them all? No, we don't catch every single one. We don't know every single one, but we know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. We know why ands are there and commas when an and isn't there. I mean, it's craziness. But we don't know everything. Of course we don't know everything. But we've understood this 40 days compared to 40 days and 40 nights for several years now. And now we come into this, in the temptations of Christ, and Luke lays them all out in order for the whole end of times. And Matthew's starts as the end of days in the final year only. It's a difference of him telling him what was coming and trying to get Jesus to accept these things that were coming at his comings, and to try to trick him into saying, here, I'll give you this, and I can give you this, and I can give you this. They were all his at his comings, and these things that were going to happen anyways. Matthew's is a different story, similar sounding, but not at all the same timing, because Matthew's is all about the final 14th year. Craziness. That was the clue right off the bat. 40 days and 40 nights. Are you ready for the next one? This one is going to make you say, what? Check this out. This is so awesome. This revelation between Luke and Mark, not only the order, but seeing that difference was the beginning when I started saying, oh my goodness, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. I didn't even realize till just as I was setting up to get going tonight that it revealed in its 40 days compared to 40 days and 40 nights that Luke's was all of it just like we've known, all in order for every event for all of the end of days from the beginning of the 40 days to the end. And Matthew's was just going to relate to the final year. I didn't even realize it till just starting. The Spirit at work, brothers and sisters. Watch this. Matthew chapter 4, verse 3. And when the tempter came to him, he said, if thou be the Son of Man, listen to this, command these stones be made bread. These stones be made bread. It's going to be pretty wild once you figure it out. But he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Do you guys remember what happens in the final year? Is there a group of people that get resurrected? There's a group of people who were lively stones from the feast of first fruits of the wheat harvest, which were the loaves of bread raised with the leaven, and they're going to be resurrected at the end, aren't they? Isn't that exactly what's going to happen? Isn't that exactly what we know? Those who won't taste of the second death, who will have part in the first resurrection. For these who have part in the first resurrection won't taste of the second death. They're having part in what? In the first resurrection, to take part in what? The glory with the Lord. Remember that? Remember that? Where was it? Romans 8? Romans 8? For I reckon that the suffering of this present time, are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed. Oh, wait, no, right here. Verse 17. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. The co-heirs in Christ, being glorified together with Christ. I told you that a moment ago. We can't, if you really, really knew that you were a part of this as a true servant, and you knew you were going to be serving in that time, you want to talk about needing to be humbled before that happens so that you can accept this knowing this is coming? That you're going to have part in the first resurrection to be glorified together as Christ was glorified? So that you can rule and reign with him as a co-heir for 1,000 years as a king and priest? What? What did Matthew say? These stones. What happens in the final year? These stones who are the bread are going to be what? Resurrected. They're going to be what? What are they going to be now? They're going to be kings and priests, reigning with Christ for 1,000 years. What do you think they'll always say? What do you think every word they're going to speak is? It's going to be everything that proceeds from the mouth of God. Isn't that what happened with Christ when he came the first time? Every word that he spoke was what he had been given by the Father. So these co-heirs with Christ, who are the lively stones, who will be resurrected from the first fruits of the wheat harvest, who were his servants, those of the raised bread, the bread with leaven, when they're ruling and reigning with him for 1,000 years, do you not think they will speak every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God? When does this happen? In the final year. When do the 40 days and 40 nights begin? They're the beginning of the 40 year of the final year. Remember the days of Noah? That final year and 10 days, what does it start with? 40 days and 40 nights. Who do we know takes part in the resurrection of the just in the end of days? Oh, in fact, let me just recap that piece for you. Right, in Matthew chapter 14. In Luke chapter 14. Remember, you have the parable of the great banquet, you have the wedding, and then you have the banquet. And it says in verse 14, "And thou shalt be blessed, for they cannot recompense thee, for thou shalt be recompensed at the resurrection of the just." So you've got what? The group that goes to the pre-trib Gentile wedding, and the group that remains that the Lord is going to have a banquet with when he comes to start those 40 days. They're going to be part of the resurrection of the just. That's the same group. It's the same difference. We showed this even in, I think it's Luke 22. Come on. Luke 22 with the 7 wives. No, Luke 20. I always mix that one up. I don't know why. In Luke chapter 20, we see the woman that had 7 husbands. Right? She had 7 husbands. And what do we see in verse 35? Luke 20, verse 35. "But they which shall be accounted worthy." That's Luke 21:36. The accounted worthy, not counted worthy, accounted worthy is used twice. Right here in Luke 20, verse 35, and in 21:36. This is the pre-trib. Okay? "But they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain that world, and," this is the second group, "and the resurrection of the dead." That's that same second group. This is that Smyrna group. This is that same group we're talking about right here. But now, as Luke's was the beginning in the 40 days, Matthew's is the end in the final year at the time when they would be resurrected and will be those who take part in the first resurrection, which is the resurrection of the just, as kings and priests, and will be speaking the words that God puts in their mouth as they rule and reign with Christ as co-heirs for the 1,000 years. Crazy, right? How about Matthew 4, verse 5? "Then the devil, taking him up into the holy city, and tempteth him on the pinnacle of the temple." He's going to take him now up to the temple. You notice how the orders changed? The orders changed, right? Because in Luke, as I've said, he's giving us the whole picture of the end of days, and he's showing it to him in a moment of time, and he's trying to convince him that he can give him all these things, which he already knew was all his anyways. Now here he is in the final year. When the Lord returns feet down, he's going to try to convince him of these things and prevent other things. I try to prevent these guys. And then what? Well, remember, the temple had been built, right? So the temple's built, so now he's taking them to that pinnacle of the temple in the holy city. And you might say, okay, but how do we know he has the city? How do we know he's got the temple? Well, how about 2 Thessalonians? I'll go it on here, it's sharper. How about 2 Thessalonians chapter 2? What happens when Satan was cast down and the pit was opened? Then we know that's when a war would break out about 30 days later, we see, right? When the image would be, when the beast would be set up again and would be in the temple of God. It's Matthew 24, the abomination of desolation in Matthew's. That's the point when what? This right here. This is the point. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. This is about that 10.5 year mark. And what do? We know war breaks out for 2.5 years against the two witnesses. But while that's happening, who takes over Jerusalem and the temple? 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. You guys know this very well. In Revelation 17, it says, the beast that was, is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Why? Because the beast gets his power for 42 months at about that midish point of seals, right? About 2.5 years in, he's got 42 months until the Lord comes at the end of the 6th year, destroys him as that rock carved without hand, destroys the 10 kings, and then what happens? He's killed. Then when Satan is cast down, having lost his battle, the key to the bottomless pit is open. The beast comes back. So he was, is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Here he is. This is the mid-trumpets, him now going into perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he is God. Listen to this. Sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Who has control of the temple of God? When Satan's cast down and the pit is open, within right about, I think it's like 30 days later, everybody is fleeing there, and the main group there are gone on the wings of an eagle until the end of all of the tribulation is over, until the end of the 14th. Remember, 3.5 years compared to them now having 2.5 years, leaving the final year, which is what we're talking about in Matthew chapter 4. So who has control of the temple? Hello. And he's going to have control of the temple until what? Until 2 Thessalonians 2:8, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. When he comes as lightning from one end unto the other, the brightness of his coming. This is the same word for coming from Matthew 24, used 4 times only in Matthew 24. This is his coming, the exact same word for the coming of, as it was in the days of Noah in Matthew 24. So I say again, who has control of the temple? That he can bring them to the pinnacle of the temple and try to tell them, hey, I can give you all of this. Because remember, Luke said in a moment in time. He was showing them a future event, and he was detailing it all in order in those temptations. In Matthew 24, it's the final 14th year, and everything is now his, which is why you don't see in a moment of time. It's nowhere to be found. Hello. All of this is picture of the final 14th year. And so what does Jesus say to him? Verse 6, and he saith unto them, this is Satan still speaking, and saith unto him, if thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. And then look what he goes into. And Jesus said unto him, it is written again, it is written again, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. This word again, I don't know if you know this, but it's only found, I don't need red. It's only found in Matthew's, not in Luke's. Fitting for what we know about again, right? Not saying that it's the time again, but it's this conversation happening again, but differently in the 2 different gospels based on the prophetic revelation of their understanding. Now look at this. Here's the word again. Matthew 4 verse 8. Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. And then he says, and he said unto him, all these things will I give thee if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Do you know this isn't found in Luke either? It's not found in Luke. Why? Because Satan's been cast down. He's had his 2.5 years. Christ is coming to defeat everything about him for which he thinks he's still going to be able to convince Christ to switch and to prevent all these things. It's already prophetically written in the subtext, in the end time eyes of Revelation, even within the gospel stories themselves. And Satan doesn't yet realize it. He still thinks he's going to win. Did you see what he's offering him? And showeth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. Well, let me show you what that is. Revelation 11. When the Lord comes at the final 14th year, which is the 7th trumpet. Remember what I was saying earlier? If we go to Revelation chapter 10. In Revelation chapter 10, we see in verse 7, but in the days of the voice of the 7th trumpet, of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished. What did it say in Matthew 24? When the angel sound, right, that great sound of the trumpet, that's the 7th trumpet being sounded, the mystery of God should be finished. What did Daniel chapter 12 say? That he will have 2.5 of the final 3.5 years, and then it'll be finished, because the Lord will return feet down on the Mount of Olives as lightning from one end unto the other. So what are we seeing? Everything pointing to that same final year as it was in the days of Noah, every single one of them representing the final year while when Christ comes down, trying to tempt him. But what do we know is going to happen in the 14th year as well? Not only is there going to be the resurrection of the just as the loaves of bread and the stones, who are the lively stones that are going to take part in the first resurrection to rule and reign with him in the final year, but it starts with the 40 days and 40 nights. Then, what was it? Then it was the temple. Then it was the temple, because Satan had the power over the temple in the final years. So when Christ returns feet down, he's going to have charge over the temple to be able to bring them to it. And then finally, to an exceedingly high mountain to show him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. But do you know what happens when Christ returns in that final 14th year? At the beginning of the sounding of that 7th trumpet, when everything is finished, right? Finished as in now everybody will recognize that this is Christ, and the whole world that remains will see. Listen what it says. And there were great voices in heaven saying, here it is, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever. What is he going to receive? He's going to receive the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. Satan's going to try one last ditch effort to try and convince Jesus Christ when he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives to bow down and serve him, and he will give everything unto him. Matthew 4 verse 9, and he said unto them, all these things will I give thee if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Isn't that crazy? Only in Matthew's portion. Because he will have been cast down, and all these things will have been given to him in that moment of time that he said they were going to be from Luke's. Luke had them all in order over the whole picture of the end of days. Matthew's is all related to the final 14th year. What do we know then happens? Well, let's finish it off with Revelation 19, as the Lord returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives, to smite them and to tread the winepress and the fierceness of wrath of Almighty God, He has the name written on him, and the name King of Kings and Lord of Lords, all in uppercase, calls them all to the supper to eat the flesh, right? For all the flying birds of heaven, to eat the flesh of horses and all of them. And what do we see? Verse 19, Revelation 19, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against them. See, this is that second war. We saw it described in Zechariah chapter 14, I think verse 2. We see it in Luke either verse 20 or 22. I mixed that one up too, in relation to the two swords that the Lord has. This is the second one at the end of seals, one at the end of trumpets, to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that brought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. And then the sword, the battle breaks out against these that sided with the beast and Satan and the false prophet, and he slays them all. And then what happens to Satan? Got to remember, false prophet and beast thrown into the lake of fire first. The war takes place, and then he deals with Satan. You see? And then we see in Revelation 20, verse 1, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Somebody had asked me the other day, I think it was a private message or a post in the forum, who has the key to the bottomless pit? The question was really, who has that key? Does God, because Jesus, the Lord, has the keys, right? So if God has the keys, why would he give them to Satan to open the pit to let them out? Well, I think we have our answer here. Okay, a star fell in this case. So in at the fifth trumpet, which is the first woe, when the pit is open, is that star that fell, is that Satan? Right? Is that Satan because he was given the key? But why would the Lord give him the key? Whereas here, we see that it's an angel come down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. So maybe that star is this same angel, for whoever it was. I can't recall who had asked me that question. So the one who has the key to the bottomless pit is probably, that star is whoever this angel is that has the key. And then it says, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is called the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years and cast him into the bottomless pit. You see? So when did Satan get cast into the pit? Right away? Nope. He takes the beast and the false prophet first, and he throws them into the lake of fire. Then he has the war, which is the treading of the winepress and the grapes of wrath, and then Satan is bound for 1,000 years. You see? So is it happen early? How long does it? How long is it going to take? We don't know every detail, right? And what do we know? We've got the resurrection of the just, the stones who are loaves. It's all there. It's pretty wild, brothers and sisters. I hope you've been able to track this, because it's awesome. It's so awesome. You see, that final year, the days of Noah, 7 Sabbaths, 7 times 7 is 49. Then shall thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. Sowing and reaping years of these sevens, like sowing and reaping years on this side, go 7 times 7. At the end of 49, 10 days later, is the sounding of the Jubilee. And it just so happens that the days of Noah, the final 49th year of the sowing and reaping year, is a year and 10 days long. It's crazy. This was a wild revelation to see. I just started on it a little bit last night, and the rest of it today. All of this teaching, all of what you saw here tonight, all of this revelation, this new incredible revelation, all came within the past less than 24 hours, about 24 hours. That's the Spirit leading, guys. Why? Because when you begin to understand this revelation in this playlist of who the Gospels are speaking to, the revelation that the Gospels and who they're speaking to reveals about the end of days, that opens up Scripture from the beginning of Genesis, from Genesis 1:1 to the end of Revelation, will absolutely blow your mind. We've been doing this for almost 8 years this September. Once I understood something had changed, once I realized something had happened, and the revelation of prophecy began. How could we be doing this for almost 8 years and always continuously, week in, week out, or a month in, month out, maybe not every week something new, but something maybe a little bit, and then huge ones and things we never foresaw, continuously, continuously, and continuously? How could it be so? How is it possible if it's not true? How can we have brought so many hundreds and hundreds of revelations, all supported by the previous ones that came before them, in deeper and greater and deeper detail, if it wasn't true? Brothers and sisters, prophecy is powerful. Understanding it is beautiful. It's a magnificent blessing, and it is so incredible to spend your time seeking and searching the revelation of the Lord in it. Remember what Revelation said. The spirit of prophecy is Christ Jesus. Isn't that crazy? We have been blessed. I am so grateful for all of you. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for you guys. If you guys weren't here, if the Lord never led anybody here, I would have stopped this a couple months in. He was going to lead people. He was going to show them what he's showing me, help them to understand it and see it for themselves. And man, oh man, this was another one. So awesome. God is good, and his Spirit is revealing the word. Brothers and sisters, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon. God bless. Bye for now.